Hello and welcome back, everybody. We are starting a new series today. This has been a series that has been waiting to come along for a very long time, but I'm excited to kind of start it. We're going to be talking about the API for Office, so the JavaScript API for Office. This is an interesting topic because you'll see different people have different perspectives of the direction that Microsoft is going with the whole VBA model, with JavaScript API and things along that nature. But basically, what we're going to be seeing is that the JavaScript API for Office is going to extend our capabilities where we can code and automate our Office applications. It's going to extend that automation to different platforms. So it will no longer be restricted to Windows desktop applications, but we can now run code that will work in web-based applications. So Office Online, Excel Online, PowerPoint Online. We're going to be able to write code now that works both in our desktop application and our web-based applications, and even things like iPads. So let's get started. So a couple things about this video. We are going to go kind of over a high-level overview, and then we're going to be talking about a specific add-in inside of our new Office applications. However, there's not going to be much coding in this video, so we're probably going to just maybe do one or two examples that are already pre-populated. But if you're looking for coding in this one, you're not going to really find it. That's going to be in the upcoming ones. But it is important that we understand what this application is and we understand what the API is doing. So very important stuff. So what is the Office Addins platform? Let me just read the definition and we'll go from there. So the Office Addin platform was designed to extend Office application interactions beyond desktop into multiple platforms, including Office Online, Office for Macs, and Office for iPads. So right now with VBA, we cannot write code that will work in things like iPads or Office, different versions of Office that are based in the web, for example. And so we always had this limited capability where we could do all of our code, for the most part, pretty much in Windows applications. But once you kind of started extending beyond Windows, you ran into some issues, and Microsoft's solution was, well, let's just build an API that will extend that capability beyond just the Windows applications, but now into the iPads. Office for iPads, Office for Mac, Office Online, the different versions of Office. So with this framework, so with this API, we can now add new functionality. So again, just like VBA, why did we do VBA? We were trying to integrate new functionality. Maybe it was something simple like taking some Excel charts and pasting them into a PowerPoint presentation. There really is no button that does that, but with VBA, we can add that new functionality. The API is the same logic. We want to extend our Office applications and add new functionality to them. And then also, it gives us the ability to now embed new types of objects, things like charts, things like visuals, things that link to things like Power BI. This allows us to embed those types of objects and things along that nature. And also, it gives us a more updated user interface. Now we can make interfaces that are a little bit more dynamic, things that are a little bit more professional looking. We are no longer using these old user forms that were designed in the early 90s. It's something that is a little bit more up to date and more kind of visually appealing, I would say, to a user. So the Office add-in platform is going to allow us to do that. However, we do have to keep in mind that this platform is still in development. They are constantly coming out with updates to it, and they are constantly adding to the object model. However, it is not a full replacement yet to VBA. A big example of this is you can't really do much with PowerPoint yet. There is no host-specific API for PowerPoint or projects. So if you want to do and automate those particular applications, you can't do that yet with the Office API. However, Excel and Word are probably some of the most, I would say, developed, along with Outlook. So those ones, you usually can do most of what you need to do. However, it's still not going to have every object we've been working with at this time. So it is changing, as time goes on, it's going to be added to. However, it is not a full replacement yet. Okay, so just understanding the playing field a little bit. What have been your options so far? Well, the most common one that you probably heard of was VBA. So this is a great application when it comes to just writing scripts that automate certain tasks and routine inside of your Office application. It was a great tool. It does a lot of great things. However, it's not being maintained anymore. They stopped maintaining VBA in, I believe, 2010, if I remember correctly. So basically, Microsoft said, well, we're going to continue to add to the object model, but as for things like updating the UI, updating, just the functionality of VBA, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to kind of focus our efforts on different platforms. So while VBA was great, maintenance is no longer happening. We also had Visual Studio Tools for Office. So this is where we leverage the .NET framework to make Excel or Office add-ins using Visual Studios. And so this was kind of an alternative to VBA. You could do more complex things with Visual Studio Tools for Office. However, there was a lot of overhead. So if you wanted to build an add-in, usually it was all this overhead that came with it. And so it wasn't necessarily a simple task. It took a lot of development time and it took a lot of effort to get things up and running, where with VBA, it was great. You just wrote a couple lines of code and bam, it worked. With a Office add-in, it wasn't as clear as VBA, so it took a little bit more effort. And now we have the JavaScript API for Office. So now this is basically extending our reach beyond the desktop applications into other platforms. And so this is extending it, and it's going to make it work across all of our platforms. And the nice thing is, at least with our, we'll see in a second, but with our Script Lab add-in, we kind of get the best of both worlds, where we can still do very similar things that we were used to doing in VBA, but we can also do the more complex stuff and actually have our own Visual Studio project solutions where we can build add-ins, build the HTML code, build the CSS. So we got a lot of control over the situation, but it's really up to the user as to which direction they want to have. Which direction they want to go. So you have options. Some are better than others, but it's really boiling down to what is your end goal at mind. Okay, so just some notes for people. So what applications are supported so far? What do I mean by this? Well, which ones do we actually have an object model for? However, keep in mind that just because there's an object model doesn't mean it's a complete object model at this point. So it might not have all the objects that we're used to seeing in VBA, but these are ones that at least have support for some of the objects. So we have Excel, Word, Outlook, OneNote, and Visio. So these all have something called the Common API, which is the API you can use across all of Office. And then we have a host-specific API, so something that basically taps in to that particular application's object model. And so these are the applications where we have a host-specific API and a common API. Which ones are we waiting for? PowerPoint. Yes, right? So right now, you cannot really do much with PowerPoint. There is a common API, so we can use the common Office API in PowerPoint, but there is no host-specific object model yet for PowerPoint. This obviously will change in the future. However, at this point, it does not exist. Same with projects. So if you were writing VBA for projects, unfortunately, there is not a host-specific API for the project application. So that will come down the road. However, at this point, it is not there. Okay, so what languages can we use when we are basically using the Office API? Right now, you got two options. You got JavaScript and you got TypeScript. TypeScript is basically a superset of JavaScript, so it's adding some new functionality and trying to fix some of the problems with JavaScript. But it's really up to you which language you want to use. I will just kind of give a forewarning. Most of my tutorials will be in TypeScript. I'm not going to say I'm a TypeScript expert by any standard or even a JavaScript expert. However, just from my simple reading so far, I have seen that TypeScript seems to be the direction Microsoft wants us to go. It's fixing a lot of the problems that were kind of prevalent inside of JavaScript. So naturally, I always kind of say, well, if it's easier to do certain things, why not just do the easier route? So it seems like the easier route at this point is TypeScript. It might require us to do a little bit more coding, but there's some trade-offs that we get when we do that. I probably will do a video at some point, maybe just introducing TypeScript and doing some basic syntax stuff, but that will be down the road. Alrighty, next topic. So now we're going to get into the add-in component. So right now, especially when the Office API came out in the beginning, There wasn't really a lot of ways to experiment with this new API. You could if you had Visual Studios, but it required that you had to go and basically build this entire project solution, and you had to know the HTML component, you had to know the CSS component, you had to also know the JavaScript or TypeScript component. And so it was just really, really hard to experiment with this new Office API. And Microsoft kind of basically had a hackathon one time, and out of that hackathon came what we call the Script Lab Office add-in. And so with the Script Lab add-in, we now have an add-in that allows us to experiment with the Office JavaScript API without actually leaving these applications. And so this is great. This is a great way to experiment, kind of get your feet wet with this particular API, but not having to do the whole component of actually building an add-in just to kind of experiment with your code a little bit. I've heard different things about the Script Lab add-in where, basically what is the end goal with this particular add-in. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be replacing anything. I've read something that potentially it might be integrated directly into Office, but I can't really say if that's true or not. You'll see. It's actually a really great add-in, and it makes things go a lot quicker than doing the whole Visual Studio process. However, at some point we're going to have to do Visual Studios just because we need to know how to build add-ins. And, once we get to that point in these tutorials, we'll see kind of how to do that process. But, really, why should we be using Script Lab? What's the whole benefit to using this particular add-in? Well, the nice thing that comes with it is we can basically modularize our code. So we can have one component that has our actual JavaScript. We have one that has our HTML that really defines our user interface for interacting with our add-in. CSS, we have the one that really dictates the design orientation of our particular add-in, and then references to libraries. So it basically splits up all those different components where it's just easy task panes that we can jump in between to modify that code. And then also probably one of the best things about it is we can run the snippets of code that we write instantly. We can just see the results in a task pane, and we can see the output in our particular Office application. This is great for experimenting. It's really easy to just write some code, experiment, and be on your way. The other aspect that we kind of like about Script Lab is we get access to sample code. So they're constantly adding sample code, it looks like. But this will basically give us an idea of how to do certain things with this Office API. So adding a chart, adding a table, setting properties, doing things like that, writing code to the console, things along that nature. So they give us access to sample code, which is awesome. Another cool thing about it is it integrates with GitHub Guest. And so with this one, we can take our little code snippets and we can share them on our GitHub repositories. This is great for people like me who want to share my code. I can just click a button and then magically everything will be kind of sent to my GitHub repository where other people can find it, which is awesome. We also get IntelliSense now with our code. So we get to be able to write our code with IntelliSense. So that obviously makes the code development process a lot quicker. And then also it allows us to try TypeScript, so it makes use of different functions inside of TypeScript. And we also get access to kind of the latest features related to TypeScript, so very useful. And more importantly, it allows us to prototype an add-in that you're planning to develop. So if you just want to see, hey, if I add this certain functionality to my add-in, will it work like the way I'm expecting? The Script Lab add-in will allow us to do that really good. Alrighty, so with that being said, we're going to jump into our Excel application. We're going to walk through the Script Lab add-in, and then we'll call it quits for the video. Alrighty, so first things first, more than likely you're not going to have this add-in installed on your system, so we're going to install it before we do anything fancy. So the first thing that you want to do is you can go to your developer tab. So if you have VBA or you've had that one open, you would just want to go there. If you do not have your developer tab open, it's very easy to enable it. You just go to Files, you go down to Options, and then you go to Customize Ribbon, and you just want to make sure that box is checked. And once you press the little button, it checks it, you press OK, you're good to go. And then from here, once you're in your developer tab, you want to go to the Add-ins section. You're going to click Add-ins. You're going to go to Store. And then you're going to type in Script Lab. It's the only one that pops up, at least at this time. And so from here, what you can do is you would just press add, and that would install the add-in on your system. So if you don't have it already, you just say add, and that will install it. I already have it installed, so I don't need to add it again. And then you're going to see a new tab that opens up. It's going to be called Script Lab. So if you click it, it will now bring up the functionality that belongs to Script Lab. The first thing that you'll notice is there's 3 groups. 3 of them are related to just scripting, so actually adding new scripts and things along that nature. One will give you a tutorial, so if you click tutorial, it opens up a nice little thing. It will prompt you to download an Excel file, and if you do that, it will basically walk you through the entire process of kind of getting started with the Script Lab add-in. I'm going to open up that workbook. Hopefully it doesn't freeze anything. I really hope it doesn't. Oh, perfect, it didn't. And they basically walk you through how to get up and running with it, how to run code, everything along that nature, and things along, just working with the code editor, switching between panes, sharing your code, and then if you want additional information, they kind of provide some resources that you can go. So very useful, very, very helpful at the end of the day. They also have a help section. So this takes you to documentation that exists on Script Lab at the moment. Keep in mind, it is constantly changing. I don't know if it's going to load. I think there was one that still isn't loading at this point. There's still bugs in it sometimes. I mean, nothing major usually, but there have been some bugs. But like I said, they're constantly updating it, so you don't really have to, 2 months from now, it could be completely different. You can see there's reference docs, so this will take you to things like the references on the certain APIs and things along that nature. And then we also have Ask the Community. So this will opens up a community forum where you can ask questions on this particular topic. And so it looks like, of course, none of them are loading. So that's always fun. Or it could be loading and it's just taking a long time. So I recently updated it. So there is a possibility that when I updated it, maybe there was a bug or something like that. I'll see what happens. Now, we're not really concerned with this stuff at that point, but I'll show you if I close this out. Maybe if I open it in this one, it will give us something a little bit different. I don't know. I doubt it will, but we'll see. And then if you actually come across any bugs, at some point, there is a GitHub repository where we can basically post some information on this particular add-in, and then they let us know and they say, okay, well, thank you for sharing the bug. This is our plan to fix it. So it looks like it's just running in circles, so I'm going to skip that for right now. Okay, coming back here. Regardless, we'll go into the scripting stuff. That's the fun stuff. Okay, so if you open up your code, and if you click this one, this will open up the code pane. It's very useful. You can expand it just like so, or if you want, you can actually kind of open it up like this, and you can expand it, so it kind of becomes its own little pane that kind of operates in the background. So you just got to make sure when you see this little icon, you hold it down and you basically move it out of the pane. You can always put it back by simply just taking it to the side and it kind of snaps into place, or you can take it outside that pane and it will work just as good too. So you'll notice when you first open the pane, there's a couple different sections. One is the actual script itself, so this is where you would write your TypeScript or your JavaScript. And then you have the HTML component. So this is something that you'll see in a little bit. This is dictating the run pane. So this is where you can add buttons, drop downs, kind of the more HTML component for the user interface. You have a CSS pane, which defines all the visual components of our HTML, things like margins, coloring, things along that nature for our user interface. And then finally, we have our libraries that we have access to inside the Office API, so we can see things, which ones are enabled. If we want to add ones, this is where we would put it. By default, there are always a couple that are added by default, but we can always add to these libraries if we want. I'm going to go back to the script pane. You can also zoom in. If you do Control and then you zoom in, it should do it. So hopefully that makes that code a little bit bigger for people. Please let me know if you can see this. I don't know if I can do too much bigger than that, or else it's just probably going to be a little bit too big in order to kind of code. But you can, if you want, well, something like that. So you can zoom in if you want, but unfortunately, I don't know if you can zoom. Oh wait, yeah. So you can do control and then you scroll, or you can do control minus, control plus, and that will zoom in. So control minus, control plus allows you to type in. This is letting you know which language you are currently coding in. You can change the actual look of your pane by going over here. If you click it once, it goes to high contrast. And if you click it again, it will go to dark mode. And if you click it again, it will go back to light mode. You also have some settings. So this is where you can, again, change the editor theme. So you can change it to dark. You can change it to light, high contrast, default settings where you can change your font family, font size, everything along that nature. You get some information about this particular version of ScriptLab if you want to know about it, anything along that. You can see the different versions of ScriptLab, so you can go in between. So you have production, beta, alpha. There's actually an older version of ScriptLab if you want to go use it. There is a 2017 version. I really don't recommend that. They kind of basically rewrote ScriptLab from scratch. I think it was to add new functionalities and things along that nature. So just keep in mind, there are different versions of ScriptLab running around right now. However, I just kind of recommend that you stick with the latest version that you download. So just stick with that one. The nice thing that you can also do is you can share your code. So if I wanted to, I could take my code that I have currently here and I can say, hey, make a new public gist. And this is basically saying make a new public snippet of code. Or I can do a new secret one. I can copy my code to clipboard. And so first it comes up with a prompt. And then if I do this, it will just paste it right in the whole thing if I wanted to. So very useful. If I share it, it will say new public gist. And so then it will tell you that it has been published, and then you can view it on GitHub. And so it goes under your GitHub profile, and you can see all the code that I wrote for this particular one. It tells me not just the JavaScript component, or sorry, not the JavaScript, the TypeScript component, but it also gives me the HTML component, and it also gives me the CSS and the libraries that I was using in order to run this particular one. So I really like this one, to be honest. It just makes sharing code so much easier. And then from GitHub, obviously, you can delete, you can start, you can unsubscribe, you can edit, you can embed this, you can download it, all sorts of different things if you want. So very useful, very, very, very useful. You can also do a private one. So this one is just saying, hey, you know, I don't want people to see it, but I still want to make it available on my GitHub. Then you would do a secret one. And then you can also update the existing one that you currently have. So as you're making changes to this, you probably want to pass on those changes to the public one. So you would just update it as usual. You can also sign in to your particular GitHub repository. If you go over here, by default, you won't be signed in. So you can log out. And then if you want, you can also log in. And so to log in, you just have to go here. You say copy to clipboard. You go to this particular web page. Oh, geez, that is a lot. And it will take you here, and it basically runs you through the process. And then it will say, okay, you encoded your GitHub authentication token. It's ready. Please copy from here and paste it back into the code editor window. So you copy it, you go back here, and then you paste that token here. You press OK, and then you will be logged in. So now you're logged in, so where you can share all your information to your repository. Now, if you want to name your little section of code, you just go right up here, and I called mine, for example, using worksheet. You can give it a name. You can also give it a description, and if you've posted it to the gist, what you can do is you can just open it up, and then you will be good to go. And then if you go back, you can also update it from here. You can cancel, all that kind of fun stuff. If you click this little icon over here, it will open up a new section of the actual pane. And so you can add a new blank snippet. You can see the current snippets that you have. So these are the ones that I have on my computer right now. These are the ones that I've shared publicly. You can also type which ones you want to find. I don't know if it actually comes up with anything when I do this. Never actually. Oh, so it does. So I think it looks like it just highlights it things along that nature. You can also do properties, and so it will just kind of narrow down that search result. So again, think of this as almost like your little personal macro workbook. This is where you're storing all of your code to kind of use it later. And then there's also samples. So if you want, you can take samples that they have for doing different things. And your samples obviously change depending on which application you're in. So if I'm in Excel, I can work with charts. If I can work with conditional formatting, custom functions, custom XML parts, data validations, document stuff, events, named items, pivot tables, range, hyperlinks, shapes, tables, workbooks, worksheets, lots of good stuff. Preview API. So this is stuff if you're part of their kind of like beta, you can see like, oh, they're going to add comments, so I want to work with comments. Scenarios. They talk about performance optimization. What is it? Just for fun, color patterns, gradients, pathfinder, stuff like that. You can import. So if you have a snippet, you can just take that URL. So again, if I share it with you guys and you want to use my snippet, you take my URL, you put it here, and it imports it for you. So very, very useful. It makes that process where you guys don't have to go down there, download everything. You just copy my URL. I can put it in my YouTube video description. You guys copy it. Lo and behold, you get the latest one. So pretty useful. I think that's neat. Going back here, let's kind of walk through just a simple example and tell you how to run code, and then we'll call it quits. Where's my samples? Oh, range. We'll do this one. We'll do copy and paste range. So all this code is here. You don't have to change anything. It usually works by itself. There have been a couple instances where, for whatever reason, the code wasn't working. I think that was just, was an older version. It happens sometimes. If you want, you can just say, hey, I want to run it. And then you can say run side by side or run in this pane. So what I like to do is I actually like to open up a second pane called run. And then this is the one where you actually get to see your user interface. And so it basically takes all this HTML code and actually converts it into a user interface. And you can actually see all the stuff it's just telling you here. So for example, the create sample data is a button that we've created. And then we have the CSS that defines our HTML component. So very useful. The first thing that I would obviously want to do is I want to say, well, create some sample data. Okay, we've created some sample data, and that actually ran one of the setup function, looks like. So it looks like that was a setup function. And if we go down, we can see that there is a setup function right here that basically populates our range of cells. I'm not going to go into the code yet. Again, we've got plenty of videos. But basically what it's doing is it's tying one of these functions to each one of these buttons. So for example, now I can copy my numbers. I've copied the range. I can copy the formula. I can copy the formula results. I can copy a single cell across a range, something like that. Copy only the format, skip blanks, transpose, all of that kind of fun stuff. So it's just demonstrating how to do certain things, explaining how to create the user interface, but then we can run our code instantly right from our little code pane, and everything works kind of nice and dandy, which is really cool. There's also a console down here. So if you do things like console log where you want to send some information to our console, it's kind of like debug print inside of VBA. It would show up right around here. And then right now for the beta component, we can create our own custom functions. I haven't gotten to this component yet. I'm saving that for another video. I still have to kind of get educated on it because it was just recently released. But we're going to be able to add basically new functions. Again, this is just like VBA in the sense of, hey, I want to go make a cube function. So taking a number and cubing it. We can now add that custom function using the Office API, but it is in preview mode. So it won't be available for everybody yet unless they're on, I think it's Office Insiders. You have to be on Office Insiders to see the preview component, if I remember correctly. So keep in mind, like I said, constantly changing it. But with that being said, that finishes our video. Again, this was kind of our introduction to this particular add-in and the Office API. Again, if you have any questions about kind of how to get started with everything, please put them down in the comments below. There is documentation available. I probably will spend a little bit of time in the next video just going high-level overview of where that documentation is. technically this stuff was supposed to be taking me there, but it looks like for whatever reason it's not working right now. Hopefully that gets fixed in future updates. But yeah, if you have any questions, again, just put them in the comments. Also, if you could, please make sure to like the video. We always appreciate the support. And if you're not already, please make sure to subscribe to the channel so that way you get regular updates as we release new videos on this wonderful topic. So thanks again for watching, everybody. In our next video, we're going to be covering basically the workbook object, and we're going to see how to write some basic code that interacts with our workbook object. So we will see you in the next video.